When I became director in the early 70s, I brought to IIASA experience I'd had at the RAND Corporation in the United States, which is a systems analytical organization. I had gone to RAND in 1956 as the first graduate school summer student at the RAND Corporation. And when I went and spent the time there, I found it a career-changing experience. I learned about a mode of approach, thought about public policy problems that I had not experienced before, and I decided to dedicate my life to it. And I felt it was an important component of solving the kinds of problems the nation and the world faced. So at IIASA, it was fairly early on that I realized that we had an opportunity here to bring that experience not only to individual scientists from a single country, but now internationally, and add a dimension that was not present in my experience, and that is to learn how to work in an international climate and to build a network of fellow students who are from other nations. And my view was that by building these networks, we would be enriching the capacity of the globe to solve problems. We would have eventually a set of alumni from the YSSP program, as we came to call it, who would be present in institutions of academia, of government, and of industry across the world, who shared the experience of IIASA, had learned how to approach problems in a systems analytical way, and who knew each other and could share experiences and perhaps build common approaches to problems in that way. So I began to see that we had a potential to build a global network of experienced systems analysts. And in 1976, we set about establishing this program. The initial name of it was the Summer Program for Young Scientists, and we soon realized that the acronym would be a little awkward in the time of Cold War. SPYS was probably not the best way to characterize it, so we simply reversed the order and called it the Young Scientist Summer Program, YSSP. In the first days, we had 17 students the first summer, and we thought that was a large amount. They occupied the space we called the Kaiser Gang, but they also brought something I had not anticipated, which was an enthusiasm, a spirit, and energy that invigorated the entire institute, and everybody shared in the joy of having them with us. I think it was a mutually beneficial experience. Subsequently, of course, we've expanded that program far beyond anything I had thought it possible, up to about 50 students per year. And I think it is widely accepted to be one of the most successful, if not the most successful, of IIASA's programs. There are now 2,000 alumni, and they populate academia and government all around the world. I had an image in mind when we set up the YSSP, in fact, not only about the YSSP, but very much engaged with it, that alumni of IIASA would become the advisors to the decision makers sitting around the negotiations. And because they shared an experience, they would become a common, they would be able to share a language that would help their policymakers to communicate more effectively among each other. So the image of an international negotiation round table with a lot of diplomats sitting in the front and IIASA alumni sitting around the back advising them was one I hoped to see come to fruition in the future. I don't know if it exists in that form exactly now, but I'm quite certain that the influence of the Institute is widely felt in governments and in academia and in industry across the globe. The world is confronted by a variety of problems that I characterize into two groups. The first kinds of problems that we're well aware of are global problems, those which affect all nations in the world and can only be solved through the cooperation of nations. The second are what I call universal problems. Those are problems within nations, such as delivering of health care, education, security, and general well-being. each of those needs to be resolved within a nation, but there are commonalities, and nations can learn from each other through sharing experience and working on these common universal problems. Both of those problems are what I would also characterize as systems problems, meaning that they don't lie within the domain of individual disciplines. You cannot solve many of them by simply considering the technology that affects them. For example, the energy problems are not simply technological problems. They also are problems of environment, and they're also problems of social institutions. So in order to understand and address these problems, you need to bring to bear a mix of disciplines. And since these are international problems, you need to address them through teams that bring to bear the international experience. There are very few places on this globe that are currently capable of addressing the kinds of problems that we face, the global and the universal ones, with interdisciplinary and international teams. One of those places, perhaps in my mind the most competent and unique ones, is IIASA. And IIASA exists because it can bring people from nations who otherwise are in a dispute, scientists who can bring the intellectual capabilities of the best people in the world to bear on problems that demand the best efforts of the world for their solution. So IIASA has a unique role to play by being one of the few, perhaps the only institution that brings together a wide range of disciplines from a wide range of countries to work on the problems that we all share. I'm unaware of any other organization that has the combination of qualities that IIASA has. First of all, there is the continuity of work on problems. For example, on the energy issue, from a global perspective, IIASA now has virtually 40 years of experience. It brings to bear first-rate analytical and scientific talent, and it has done for many years. It has accumulated knowledge, for example, models, databases, contacts, networks, that I believe no other organization in the world has, so that when it addresses the energy problem, the resources, the intellectual property, the intellectual capacity that IIASA has, its asset, its intellectual asset is greater than any other organization, I believe, in the world, and its continuity is very important. So it's the competence, the continuity, the intellectual asset, but it's also the international participation. The fact that what IIASA does is not the result of the specialists in one nation or in one subgroup, but rather of a wide range of nations, gives it a credibility, I believe, that most other organizations would find difficult to achieve. One of the most valuable and unique and distinctive qualities of IIASA that was built in from the beginning was the NMO structure, the national member organizations. Because we were an institution intended to build bridges across East and West, it was very important to keep politics as far as possible from the scientific work of the institution. And the mechanism introduced to achieve that was that the membership of IIASA, unlike most international organizations, would be through scientific bodies rather than through governmental bodies. So it would not be an intergovernmental organization, but rather an inter-scientific organization institute. Those scientific organizations were the national member organizations, and in the early days they tended to be the academies of science of each of the participating nations, the Soviet Academy of Science, the National Academy of Science in the US. And having representatives of those bodies sitting around the council table is entirely different from having representatives of governmental agencies sitting around the table, because the tendency of representatives of governmental agencies is to bring into the IIASA Council the issues that appear in other intergovernmental forums. And that would have had a tendency to politicize the Institute. So I think that was a brilliant part of the initial conception of the Institute, that the NMOs would be scientific bodies separated from the political governmental organizations. Now, over time, that distinction has eroded, and a number of the NMOs are represented by governmental agencies, usually scientific governmental agencies, but governmental agencies nevertheless. And my fear, frankly, is that through that means we will find the slow and potentially detrimental intrusion into the Institute of the political component that we have worked so hard to keep out. The other thing that must be said about NMOs is that they must understand that in order to achieve the benefits of IASA membership, there are responsibilities and activities and roles that the NMOs must play. They cannot be just passive participants, but the Institute depends upon them for its effective work in each of the national member countries. For example, if you have now 19 NMOs, it is impossible for the Institute to devote its resources to individual problems in each NMO. It has to work on problems that have a common basis across countries. And it's the NMO that has to find the linking organization, the customers, the policymakers, the analysts who can work with IASA to translate IASA's work into something relevant for their nation. And I find it disturbing that some NMOs these days believe that IASA should be doing work only on their direct problems. That is not what IASA was created to do. It wasn't designed to work in individual nations, but rather to do work that's of common value, and that is up to the NMO to find a way to translate that work into value for its own nation. Sadly, most national member organizations are not funded at a level or staffed at a level that enables them to take advantage of IASA as fully as they should if they want to get the full value from their contributions. So I think the national member organization is an absolutely critical part of the IASA framework, and it must be an active partner with IASA if they are each to get the full benefit from the relationship.